My name is Nicole, and I'm going to be presenting today on the article written by Jeannie Austin, Restorative Justice as a Tool to Address the Role of Policing and Incarceration in the Lives of Youth in the United States. So Austin begins by writing that the library functions as both place and space, and defines place as the collections, organizational structures, and the physical structure of the library, or of an area for teens, and space as the less tangible aspects of the library, including culture, acknowledging that the culture of librarianship in the United States is heavily influenced by institutionalized racism and white normativity. Space especially is a critical component because it dominates whether youth will feel that the library is a welcoming location in which they can feel comfortable to frequent. Austin additionally notes that many of the rules enforced in the library pertain to physical space, such as noise levels, comportment, speed of pace, and abstractions read through gesture, such as respect or defiance. Austin acknowledges that white normativity is enforced through these rules, and often youth of color, LGBTQ youth, and gender nonconforming youth are those who face the consequences of these rules most disproportionately. The implementation of teen areas was designed to welcome teens to libraries and allow them to have a more positive view of the library and recognize it as a place of refuge and safe space. Austin acknowledges influential scholar in restorative justice, Marshall's definition of restorative justice, a process whereby all the parties with a stake in a particular offense come together to resolve collectively how to deal with the aftermath of the offense and its implications for the future. And additionally, as defined by Sharp, an additional influential scholar in restorative justice invites full participation and consensus, seeks to heal what is broken, seeks full and direct accountability, seeks to reunite what has been divided, and seeks to strengthen the community in order to prevent further harms. Austin additionally notes the presence of restorative justice in Indigenous knowledge and practices by First Nations and Maori peoples, writing that in many of her cited restorative justice practices, restorative justice inherently focuses on community through a bottom-up approach. The rest of the article involves interviews of librarians and staff in regards to restorative justice. Austin writes regarding the interviews that interviewees make clear that the incorporation of restorative justice can sit alongside a concern for meaningful representation in collections and programs to address the institutionalized racism and homophobia of library services. Doing so creates a more complete response to the stated needs and desires of youth. The interviewees range in a variety of neighborhoods in which they work with a variety of knowledge levels on restorative justice. The questions to the interviewees included: how would you describe your disciplinary measures involving teenagers? How does Teen Services work to advocate for teens in relation to disciplinary measures? How have you experienced these encounters? How have you implemented restorative justice in your individual practice? How are restorative justice concepts different or similar to your previous disciplinary practices? And what has been the process of institutionalizing restorative justice concepts in library practice? What are the barriers to institutionalization? Austin writes regarding the interviews, feminist ethnography acted as a lens, allowing coded analysis of the interviews to take place as situated within understandings of the demographic, politicized, and police characteristics of neighborhoods and the overall city. Austin disclaims, interviewees' comments are held within the knowledge that the youth served by the library system are heavily surveilled, policed, and incarcerated, and that the interviewees who self-selected to be included in this study work daily with youth who experience these life-shaping forces. The results of the interviews proved revealing yet hopeful. For example, teen librarians overwhelmingly felt that they were expected by library staff to be the primary arbiters of disciplinary practice of youth, even when librarians felt supported by staff. Additionally, certain librarians expressed that they either intended or had previously contacted youth's parents as an attempt to improve behavior of teens in the library. Typically, these sentiments were the results of a lack of power, age of youth acting out, and a desire to keep out security and police. Austin notes that in the majority of these behavioral situations, they mainly pertain to the behavioral codes of the library, and only a few of the examples provided related to physical interaction or threat. It is also acknowledged in the interviews that security staff can also contribute to restorative justice practices by involving practices that lead to reaching resolution or agreement making rather than confrontation. I want to include a powerful quote in regards to an example of an implementation of restorative justice, in which a librarian conducted a program that allowed patrons to send 134 handmade Christmas cards to youth in juvenile detention centers. In regards to this, Staff A said that it shows them that people care, gives them respect. Isn't that the first thing, to feel like you matter? It is important to note that these interviews revealed that often youth are completely aware of the power imbalance between youth and adults. I want to include a relevant quote. Staff A, for years, has emphasized the role of the state as an interceding factor in youth's life chances, especially for youth of color. They were careful to not reiterate patterns of the white savior as much as possible through holding youth accountable to their abilities rather than infantilizing youth or viewing them as victims. Austin acknowledges that there is a lack of sexuality mentioned in these interviews and writes, "It is possible that sexuality was not often explicitly mentioned because so little information is easily available to youths regarding sexuality and gender identity. That said, markers of sexuality or of trans or gender nonconforming identity can sometimes be recognized, at least impartially, by people who have an informed ability to interpret the cues individuals use to express their sexual or gender identity. This may imply that staff could use more support and training about working with LGBTQ and gender nonconforming youth, or alternatively, that youth did not view the library as a space in which sexuality and gender identity were specifically made visible." The next part of the interview regards the building and the space/place of the library as a role towards teen sentiments towards the library. It is upsetting to youth to solely have a teen corner that does not adequately accommodate the size of groups of youth patrons frequenting the library. It is important to recognize the necessary approach when confronting behavioral problems in youth. They should feel that the library is still a place of welcome and they can come back when they please, despite maybe being asked to leave that particular day. Additionally, it is important that staff do not reinforce a traditional library culture, and this can be changed through more racially diverse hiring practices or hiring staff that is more familiar with and passionate about restorative justice. It is incredibly important to avoid situations that can be adequately prevented by education on restorative justice, such as promoting oppressive practices in the library, turning people away for biased reasons, and causing irreparable damage to patrons, and reinforcing stereotypes that endanger the dignity of any individual. Interviewees recognize the need for leadership when it comes to restorative justice, and that those with power need to embrace non-traditional approaches to harm in order to promote more restorative justice in the future. Additionally, training in physical space for restorative justice circles would be extremely beneficial. Ultimately, the interviews reveal a shift from traditional disciplinary practices in the library is occurring, and are shifting more towards restorative justice practices, and the majority of interviewees express the incorporation of restorative justice as a positive means to address the behavioral mores of the library and the realities of youth's lives. My questions for you to consider are: how do you think rules regarding behavior in teen areas can be better designed to implement restorative justice practices and ensure they are not reinforcing a power imbalance? Why do you think teen librarians feel they are solely responsible for being disciplinary with youth patrons rather than other staff? How would you plan a staff training session to train staff on recognizing gender nonconforming or LGBTQ youth in the library and ensure they feel welcomed? Please feel free to break down the imagined training session into sections and key objectives. And lastly, do you think the ALA should create policies on restorative justice to ensure that restorative justice is not solely practiced by experts on it or a small niche group that has been educated on it, but rather librarians on a much wider scale? Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are able to better understand this article and that you enjoy reading it. It is really informative and a helpful article. Thank you for watching.